plant remedies for diseases. And it's really about how modern society encounters a primitive society and doesn't quite get it. This takes it one step further, and it's all about the unadulterated culture that is corrupted by modern influences. And that's what appealed to me about it. Apart from it's stunningly shot. I don't know if you noticed that on your television screens. I first came to it in a big theater where I hosted a discussion for it. And think back to that, the Yona, the dance that is performed as a courtship dance. In the very beginning of the film, before the titles come up, you have two versions of the Yona. A young prepubescent boy dances with her and can't keep up, and he falls down. And then our hero, whose name is Rapayet, or Rafa, as he's sometimes called, takes off his shirt and dances with her, and he can very much keep up. And I was struck this time by how it's a lot like a bullfight, where the matador leading the bull with the red flag or the red cape, except she was wearing the red cape. So it's a question of who's in charge here, the man or the woman. And clearly it's a matriarchal society, and he's got to live up to her expectations. Can he follow her moves? And he succeeds. And of course, then he comes up with this very macho comment, "You're mine, baby. You know, you're my woman," as the subtitle said. And it's a stunningly graphic movie. And I'm not a wardrobe designer, but the dresses these women wore had astonishingly beautiful prints throughout. It was like this was status for a woman, even in a poor subsistence society. Now, granted, we were looking at a higher caste family, and but most of the women we saw had the clothing was just remarkable, and in its uniqueness and its color and its vibrancy. This one topped them all, I have to admit. What I liked about it, to dive into your question, Mitch, is that you may not have seen it as a Godfather epic for South America, but I saw it as what happens when modernity invades a less developed society and corrupts its own values in the pursuit of money and prosperity. And this has so much resonance today, not just with globalization, but with Jewish society, if you want to extend it that far. But what constitutes identity, and how important to us is it? Watching it for the fourth time this afternoon, all of the discussions are all about identity, loyalty, tribal traditions, culture, our rules, our laws that are not written down but understood. This is all about the social contract these Indians have with each other. And I found that astonishing. And I'd like to set us in the place. My little introduction to the movie is these people have lived there for millennia. They were an indigenous people, and they survived the invasions of the colonization efforts of both the English and the Spanish, and drove them both out. And they still exist today. Juan Gabriel Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude and other much beloved books, is descended from this tribe. His mother was a member of a clan like this. So I also want to point out what appealed to me is that the land in which they live, it's almost a desert. You don't know where the buses and the trucks come from, just around a corner of cactus, or scruffy growth. There's nothing there. These people exist in a vacuum, but to them, it's not a vacuum. To them, this is the universe because it's all they have. So what do you do when you grow up in a sterile environment? You create culture to fill the void. And I looked at all the traditions these people have and saw this was a way to bring order to society that didn't know how to structure itself, or no society does. I mean, a society of apes, like the mountain gorillas of Africa, it's, the man's in charge and he protects the women and the babies. from intruders, and people kind of serve him, but they're very pacific animals because they have no enemies, right? But there's still a culture there. I don't know how many of you have been to see the mountain gorillas of Africa, but it's pretty spectacular. They'll walk right past you because you're boring to them. They've habituated to the tourists, but they haven't been ruined by the tourist trade. You can't touch them, although my sister-in-law had a baby come and sit in her lap, and the mother did not, the mother was so comfortable she allowed it to happen. But I'm getting off the track here. The point is, we're looking at societies that have created their own social order. Now, I try to do this as much as I can because this is a paid commercial message, although I'm certainly not paid. In Torah study, what are we looking at? We're looking at the language of a society 2,000 years ago, reflecting upon itself, telling its story the way it felt compelled to tell it. So they're trying to create an explanation for how do you live when there are no other laws extant other than the Pharaoh's laws, right? Or a multi-deistic societies, plural, that were around Abraham and his forebears, who were multi-deity worshippers. And it also makes us think of how do the Hindus live? There are like 1,500 gods in the Hindu religion, and each family adopts their own, maybe a more personal way of connecting with a higher power. I'm virtually ignorant about that culture, but the point is that people invent what they need. They invent a social order they need to survive. They invent rules and traditions that are meant to keep family cohesiveness and keep tribal peace. And probably the most, next to family loyalty, tribal peace is the most important theme in the film and is most often referred to. I want to jump into Peregrino, who's the older guy with a cane. He's called the word messenger. Now, why is the word messenger important to these people? Anybody want to chime in on that? Let's see, who are the messengers amongst us? Let's see, what lawyer can I pick on tonight? Okay, I'll leave the Schwimmers alone because they're semi-retired. But let's think about that. What's the function in the movie of the word messenger? Okay. Okay, Arthur, back in the game again, out of semi-retirement. You're muted though, so most retired people feel muted too, but it's okay.
Oh, here we are. They're basically the mediators among the various clans and families.
Okay, you want to dive into that? Just peel back the layers of mediator. They speak
They try to negotiate a peaceful solution to problems.
Peaceful, yes, they do. In the film, they certainly do.
Yeah.
The word messenger keeps the peace between the clans of the tribe. Brad, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think they also represent the collective memory of the tribe and the rules and the rituals and the history of the tribe.
You're right. It's an oral tradition, so somebody has to remember it. Right now, he was Rafa's cousin or uncle. So, and Rafa married into the clan, the Pashina clan, which is Ursula, the queen bee, that's her clan. Anibal, the cousin, is of another clan. And then we learn late in the picture, there are all these other word messengers that come to have that great convention, and knock heads with each other as well as with Ursula. And they kind of work it out. But again, this is the key to this culture, I think, in that they work it out amongst themselves. And the families work it out amongst themselves. Now, I'm getting ahead of us, but looking ahead in our conversation, you'll notice as the family gets into greater and greater jeopardy, the power shifts from Ursula to Lafayette. He makes more of the decisions because of the decisions are about the business, right? And the relationship with Annibal, the uncle who has the swimming pool at the end. Do I need to define? Oh, okay. Zaida is Rapayat's wife. Ursula is Zaida's mother. I forget the name of the grandmother who appears in dreams. But the dreams are a very important part of this. It's a little inconsistent in that Rapayat's dreams only come at the very end when he feels he's slipping, losing control. Because his friend Moises, or Mohan, who's Brazilian or dark, who's not Wayu, is considered the gringo, the Gentile, the Shiksa, or Shagets. He's the other. And the word for that is Ayuna. And it's often referred to and say, you deal with the Ayunas. You're really good with the Ayunas. That's like the other, the people who are not us, outside the tribe. So I was very impressed with that clear distinction they make. The cultural identity, the lesson here is that you can't have cohesiveness unless you can say who's not in the group. Because then you lose what to cling to. If you can say all Democrats are the same or all Republicans are the same, you've lost any meaningfulness. You know?
That's true.
But if you can say what?
That's true. That is true of all groups.
All groups, including Jewish groups. And
Yes.
so the clannishness is also very important because these people take their tradition as a founding source of, it's the basis of their identity. And they may, you know, it's not spirit worship, although we'll talk about the burials later, which I found remarkable. These people are driven by their ancestors and their interpretation of their ancestral history. But they all know the story that they drove out the English and the Spanish, right? Do they know that disinterring the bones from the tombs is like unveiling a headstone at a Jewish cemetery? No, they don't know that, right? But they take the bones and they clean them off, and that's Shevra Kadisha, right? And then they bury them underground in the family plot. I mean, there are incredible cross-cultural references here that you may have picked up on others, but that really struck me as being very Christian. Plus, there are crosses on the graves in their cemetery. Brad?
Well, what struck me about the movie...
You're muted, Brad.
No, it's not.
No, I'm
You're
not.
still muted. Karen will solve it.
You're not muted.
Okay.
Can you hear me? What struck me about the
You know what,
movie-
Brad? Your window is lining up in yellow, but we can't hear you.
Oh, we can hear him.
Now I
Jim.
can. Oh, you know why?
Most of us can hear.
I gestured and I hit my mute button. Sorry.
what struck me
Entertainment tonight.
about the movie was the references to Greek epics, especially the Trojan War and the abduction of Helen. The fact that it is a violation of a woman that triggers
The war.
war in Greek epics. You've got the role of the birds. Birds play a very important role in Greek and Roman mythology as omen makers. And then you've got this system of alliances amongst the different clans, which is very important, for example, in the Iliad. And I you know, it to me, it was very much a replay of a Greek
Greek tragedy. Yeah. I agree, although I'm less familiar with them than you. But I think that the filmmakers may not have done that intentionally. By the way, this is based, if you've noticed the opening introduction, the card that goes up, it says, this is based on a true story of a family from 1960 to 1969 in the region. There was a drug family. I don't know. And by the way, the man and woman, the husband and wife who made this film actually went and lived with them for months to research this and to get a sense of who they were. We can't commit the intentional fallacy here and say they intended this. But what I want to say is that the filmmakers put their sensitivity on the notion that this is human tragedy in the making, the rise and the fall, the arrogance, the greed, pursuit of power and money, not, closing your mind to your traditions, all the classical reasons for a fall, there's Shakespearean reasons for the fall too. Like in Lear, he's just so arrogant, he doesn't recognize the love of his one true daughter. There are these fatal flaws that we humans have. And these people go down that rabbit hole because they're chasing something that's foreign to their culture. They are the birds of passage. They are passing from a sustainable, sustaining traditional culture that nourished them, maybe kept them primitive, until modernity came along. But they are the ones who passed into the new world and were devoured by it. So Mitch, where is Mitch? That's what drove me to this picture. I saw all that in it. And each time I watched it, I'm more convinced that this is really not just about them, it's about every culture and its vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. So the fatal flaw is greed, pursuit of money, loss of family values. And as I was watching it this afternoon, it opens with a song of the shepherd. And it closes with the song of the shepherd when Idris, or whatever her name is, the young daughter who's escaped, takes a few goats and goes off into the wilderness, not knowing how to shepherd goats. And they narrate their history with songs. And this film is bookended with such a narration. So the more you see it, I think the richer it becomes for you. It certainly did for me. Some of the performances are just wonderful and naturalistic, but if you felt adrift in it, I understand, Mitch. I don't know what generated your question. It's okay if you didn't like it. You want to share with me why you asked that question? Because I've got a lot to say about that. Why you might have had a problem. There were many problems.
Jim, I did not have a problem.
Okay. I'm sorry. Forget it. We don't want to hear from you.
Yeah, I thought that the film showed the destruction of a capitalistic society, and I was fascinated by the Peace Corps who gave out the postcards that said "Fight communism," and yet they were living in a commune society, which was certainly seemed like it was somewhat
right. Yeah, it's like,
communistic, and the thing that impressed me the most was how law and order disappeared. How the rule of the word messenger no longer had his power, and the general order that the tribes had in unwritten laws were destroyed. And it kind of gives me a sense of some of our society today, where law and order is of question. And and you find somebody was walking down one of the streets the other day in Beverly Hills, and somebody ripped off his watch just like that, and nobody cares. It's just part of what it is today.
Yeah.
But no, I don't want to disappoint you, Jim. I thought it was a unique film.
It really was. I've never seen anything like it. There's a reason why it was Colombia's or Venezuela's nominee for Best Foreign Film. Donna, did you want to say something?
Yes, I appreciate you showing the film. I actually didn't get to watch it, but I'm listening, and I can tell you.
Okay, Donna, remember we discussed it. Donna,
I'm glad you talked about it.
We talked about this, and you're certainly welcome to observe. But if you haven't seen the film, it's not fair to the others who.
You're right. That's why I just said.
Okay, thank you very much for understanding. Mitch, so back to that. This is not about the destruction of a capitalist society. This is the destruction of a communal society that capitalism brought. It brought selfishness. It broke down the social order. It broke down the communication between the clans. When Annibal, the guy with the aviator glasses and the pot belly, shoots we don't see it, but shoots the word messenger, Peregrino. Yeah, that's his name. It's the biggest assault on their culture ever. This is like walking off with 700 pages of top secret information to your private home after your presidency. It's nobody could ever have imagined that something like that would have happened, because it never did. So these people are threatened by that. And that brings down the house. The convention of word messengers agrees, we'll go out and get them, but you got to turn over everything to us, and you got to turn over Rapayet. You know, it's like they make deals with each other. It's it's not backroom dealing, because this is open, transparent dealing. This is the culture dealing in its own term. It's a town meeting, you see. And this is where all the knives come out and the sentiments come out. The word messengers didn't all agree with each other at the end, but it was agreed, we'll eliminate all the guilty parties if you'll give it up, Ursula. And it's like she was responsive to the other clans. She's the one who said, you know what? I can only go to bat for my family. Please give me Leonidas, my errant grandson, you know, and they gave her his body back. But everybody loses in this. Rapaya is shot. She loses her grandson. Zaida is shot. Her son is killed, probably because he didn't walk away with the daughter. There's not a single winner in this. Even Annabelle, who's an antagonist, has to give everything away to the Spaniard, right? The Spanish-speaking, gun-toting, skinny guy. If he'll just take revenge for him. Bring in the guys from Medellin, where the drug cartels are. Bring in the mercenaries and destroy these people. So it's extreme vengeance. And it's like all the pillars of society are falling apart. Communication, adjudication, tradition, sense of affection for the other, allowing money to come between cousins. You know, you can describe it any number of ways, but this is how it happens. And Mitch, I'm glad you brought up our contemporary society, because when you don't believe in the messengers, you know, whether it's the New York Times or the New Republic or, you know, One America Now, which is falling apart, or Truth Social from Trump or Fox News, you know, everybody's got to believe in something to the exclusion of the other. Now, I'm not going to defend any of the misinformation outlets. They deserve only our worst condemnations and actions against them. But the point is, who are we missing out on? You know, it's a warning sign to us. Not that you know, we have other sources of information than an old man with a walking stick, you know, but you have to be careful. You still have a responsibility to sort through the information. But that kind of communication was much simpler. He was the honest messenger, the honest broker from one party to the other, pleading for peace, right? Saying, please, we have conquered the conquerors before. We have survived, and we only have survived because we stayed together. And sure enough, the house falls down because they're not staying together. Now, let's talk about the characters. And this guy Moses, or Moises, is pivotal because he's black. He's not Wayu. We don't know what he is, but he's an Ayuna.
Spanish. He's Spanish.
Well, he speaks Spanish, but he could, you know, we don't know if he's Venezuelan or Colombian. You know, he's certainly not Ayuna. He's other. That's the point. And he takes first, you know, he's this loose cannon. He spends all the money on drink, and then he gives, he sneaks up on Rapaya and Zaida with a Range Rover he wants to give them. And that's fun, but he goes too far. because he intercepts, he kills the pilots. And even though these people know they're in an illegal drug trade, they would never shoot an Iuna for the trespass, the fact that they were dealing with other people. So this loose cannon of Moises creates a real problem. He's disgraced the family. And Rafa is told, get rid of him, kill him. And he goes to him, he says, no, just give up your side of the business. I'll give you a commission. Remember, I'll give you a piece of the business. You have to remove yourself from it. And then the first big offense comes. And this is a little, Mitch, this is what I was referring to before. Sometimes the storytelling is a little murky. You have to know who killed whom. And we see the first killing of a group of men on the roadway. And that's Moises intercepting the marijuana delivery team from bringing the marijuana to Rapayat after he said, get out of the business. So he's trying to take over on his own. And that's why Rapayat is shamed into going after Moises and killing him. So it's like he pleads for Moises in the beginning, but after Moises commits this unpardonable sin of bringing death and murder into the family and trying to weasel into the marijuana business, then he has to do the elder's bidding and remove Moises. But then the two antagonisms become Anibal, the uncle, and Rapayat. When Leonidas insults the daughter of Anibal at the drunken funeral of Anibal's brother. Anibal's brother was one of the dead bodies on the roadway. So you can see how there's a series of cascading events that becomes personal. Your guy, Rapayat, Moises, is responsible for the death of my brother. And then at the funeral, which I'm kind enough to invite you to, your cousin, Leonidas, comes on to my daughter and then makes her guardian eat dog shit for money. You know, it's like, it's this cascade of causation and consequence where they're at war with each other. And, you know, the money and the dog shit and the flirtation, that could have all been solved, right? Give me 2 weeks of his time and I'll absolve him of the crime, you know? But when he rapes her, that's unforgivable. And that's when the walls fall down. That's the end of it. Because it brings Anibal and Rapayat and the Pushina clan into irreconcilable differences, you know, and that's why he said, you know, you disgraced my daughter. I'm going to hire this Spaniard to get rid of all of you, because the most important thing to me is revenge. I'll give away all my fortune, this life I've built with Rapayat. You know, he appears on a donkey at the end. He's just as destitute as Rapayat is at the end. So everybody loses. That's what's so remarkable about this. There are no winners and there are no losers. Maybe the tribe gets, as the multi-clan tribe gets to survive. But we don't know, you know, but it's a parable. I mean, it's based in a reality of a real culture, but it's a parable to the rest of us as to what pillars of our society are being broken down. You know, what do we need to stay together? Stan would talk to us and say, Rabbi Davids leads our Torah study group. He'd say, when you stop seeing other people as individuals, stop seeing your shared heritage. You know, this isn't far from a reform interpretation of the Torah. It's also not very far from a progressive interpretation of democracy or a liberal interpretation of democracy. Those of us of a certain age probably took civics in junior high school. It's not offered anymore. By the time I got to high school, it wasn't offered. So your obligations to the other American citizens were never taught. Instead, what were we taught? Acquisition, conformity, pursuit of creature comforts. What happened to the values, you know, that are at the core of the Constitution, the idealistic values? The Constitution isn't perfect. either were Washington and Jefferson. You know, it's not about perfection. It's about what did they aspire to and what was the value of that commonly held aspiration that helped us move forward. I mean, slavery drove us apart. It had to, because ultimately it was dehumanizing. And when you say in print, all men are created equal, it's like, it's very hard to sustain that unless you say that Black people aren't equal, you know, and it just reached a point where we couldn't, even 19th century America couldn't tolerate that. By the way, you know, New Yorkers had slaves too, Black slaves. They treated them a lot better. And we talked about that with Jonathan, the American cultural historian, the Jewish guy from Brandeis. Why am I blanking on his name? Jonathan Sarnow, right. And not to forgive them, but the point is, we have this reckoning with truth, and we've been coming to it. And we're dealing now with a lot of problems that we've been in denial about for 2 centuries. And it's coming back to bite us. You know, a flawed constitution, the electoral college, the ability to regulate voter requirements. It's so far at gerrymandering. Supreme Court didn't have a right to deal with gerrymandering. Are you kidding? This is about one man, one vote. You know, they could look the other way. Brad, you're not a lawyer. You don't get to talk.
Well, no, Jim, I mean, I think we're losing sight of the fact that what this is essentially about, what triggers this war, as you said, is this violation of a woman, as it was the Trojan War. This is nothing to do with capitalism. It is nothing to do with democracy. It is a timeless theme in art and in literature, and it is played out here in this movie.
Yeah, I don't make that distinction, Brad, because when I look at, okay, a woman was insulted. Why was the woman insulted? Because Leonidas, the errant youth who felt entitled and overplayed his hand as a Brahmin, got drunk and indulged himself. To me, it's about self versus society.
But it's a rape. There is a rape at the
Why did the rape
heart of this
happen?
movie.
Well, yes, there is a rape. So I'm not saying there aren't parallels to Greek tragedy.
And that's the bridge that's too far.
It is. It is. But I think the film traces the source of why Leonidas could cross that bridge. Not that it goes into his character that much. But he's not black and he is black and white the whole way through. There's no middle ground with him.
I'm really troubled by the reference to Greek mythology. It's kind of superimposing Western conceptual ideas onto a primitive culture and looking at the culture within its own terms. And what really is different about this situation is that it's modernity itself that essentially corrupts and destroys what had been a primitive and beautiful society that had.
You're freezing on us, but I certainly agree.
Jeff, I would say what I would say you're dealing with here is an archetypal pattern.
So
that crosses cultures, that crosses time. It's eternal.
Right. I think Jeff is saying the same thing, and I certainly am. I totally agree. There's something very fundamentally human about this, and we're seeing it through their lens of the YU people. So I don't think we're at odds that much. I don't think the filmmakers had in mind Greek tragedy.
But part of the difference is here, as I said, is that this is kind of the tragedy of primitive culture, is what happened to it when modernity, kind of the modern world, entered into primitive society and destroys that society. In the case of America, it's not an outside force that's coming in to destroy it. It's being destroyed from within. and that's an essential difference here. There's a very famous anthropological study by a woman named Lauren Sharp, where it's called Steel Axes for Stone Age People. And she traces how this one transition, where they get steel axes, utterly destroys the culture from within, because they now had to explain where steel came from and had to develop a mythology around the steel. It destroyed the kind of relationships between the elders and the children. And here we're seeing that playing out. To me, the tragedy of this film is really not so much on an individual level, but it's what modern society has done to primitive cultures.
And to itself. I mean, I don't want to get away from this, because they're the seeds of our deterioration now in flaws in the Constitution and in our embrace of individualism and capitalism. There are many other missteps along the way, but I'm just saying that we have not attended to these differences properly. Why, I think back to the 60s. My wife saw colored drinking fountain signs, when she went to Florida from New York, when she was a kid. I never did, for some reason, when I went once in the 50s. So our country, those of us who lived through the 60s, see it as a liberating time, and it was up to a point. But we didn't resolve those differences. There's still terrific racial inequalities and biases and white supremacists. My wife likes to say Trump made them come out from under the rocks and legitimize them, and I think he did. But
Can't stand him.
It's like Brad, I think you were saying this is a fundamental human trait. These flaws come back and devour us if we let them. And we have buttressed ourselves against this kind of menace, whether it's from outside or from inside, with these institutions. It's the function of culture. When you begin to chip away at the sources of strength, there's nothing to replace it. People get accustomed to the cushioning effect of what the tradition provides them, and we get complacent. We thought free speech meant everything in the 60s, and it's gone a long way until the notion of free speech was co-opted by people who wanted to refuse lesbians making a wedding cake for lesbians, and that was free speech. Forget about issues of the marketplace and the public sphere and the public sector. Part of this American individualism and exceptionalism, but this supreme emphasis on individual freedom at the expense of social concerns. And how do we take care of other people? It's just as holy as taking care of ourselves. And we're paying for it. And this film brought up a lot of those feelings for me. I didn't pity them. I felt sorry because I liked Rapayan and I liked Ursula, and I loved Zaida. And the Peregrino, he was a terrific character. For him, it was like, you're tampering with my reality when you deny my authority to speak here, because that's who I am. That's my identity. You take this away from me, I'm nothing. Our culture's nothing. And the convention of word messenger says the same thing. This is an insult to who we are. Even though we may have our differences and we live in different parts of this vast desert plain, this is who we are. And it's a real lesson in social cohesiveness, and it can be very strong, but it's also very fragile at the same time. Okay, I've said enough for 2 sessions. So Mitch, come back in, please.
I thought it was interesting how the creator of the script chose to bring the Peace Corps and the Americans into the story, almost like they were the seed
Yeah.
that for which the empire grew and their desperate need for weed and their communal society was, to me, a way of the writer showing that America was partly to blame for all of these things.
Right. Now, this is a true story. I mean, based on a real clan. We have to acknowledge that. So it's not like they invented the Peace Corps characters. It may have happened.
Well,
But let's keep that. Howard, did you have something to say?
Yeah, yes, apropos of this question. I read one reviewer who seemed to be speaking pretty authoritatively that although the writers said that this story is based on a real events and therefore implied that their story about the genesis of the Colombian drug trade essentially being Peace Corps volunteers, it's actually completely ahistorical. There were no Peace Corps volunteers in that area.
Again, that's beside.
Don't let the truth get in the way.
They have a good story.
And that's bullshit. That is bullshit. Pardon me.
It's a movie, Howard.
Oh, okay, let's say this, Howard. What if they hadn't been
It's
told?
brought up the question of whether the American Peace Corps, according to this movie, was the cause. This movie
okay.
shows that the Peace Corps was the cause of the drug trade.
No. You're taking it to
I'm
an
just
extreme
mentioning
conclusion.
the fact that it is contrary to what you said, that it is not historical.
It may not be historical, but if we took the two words Peace Corps out of it and they were just hippie vacationers who had a drug connection, would that suit you? I mean, you see, you're blowing the detail out of proportion to its place in the story. You know what I'm saying? It could have been any Americans who opened up this linkage. Remember,
you couldn't generalize it into American imperialism versus capitalism and so on.
I don't do that. No, I'm not doing
I
that.
heard it.
I want to trace the capitalistic instinct to Rapayat. The first time we meet him, he delivers 3 cases of spirits to some guy on that mysterious road. And then he gets on the bus with Moises, right? And then they take that money and they go buy coffee, right? And then they sell the coffee and they have cash to buy their first weed. When they're celebrating the coffee sales, you see, that's the growth of it, that instinct to profit. It's seemingly innocent. Nobody got hurt. I got some pleasure out of it. It's a path that you don't know where it will lead when you embark upon it. They got reinforced for dealing in contraband because it was, for them, easy money in the beginning. So I don't see it as they're blaming America for introducing the seeds of capitalism and greed. It was there all along in the Wayuu people.
Well,
Now, let's take it back. Go ahead.
Can we agree on this?
What?
This movie may have portrayed the genesis of the drug trade in Colombia as coming from the Peace Corps, from Peace Corps roots.
It's a minor blip. It was just their first sale.
But can we agree that that's
Yeah,
true?
it was a lot bigger than the Peace Corps group because they had planes coming and going all over.
Yeah, there were other people. Remember, that's the whole point, that the flyers were dealing with other sources, out of efficiency.
I didn't say
So-
that the Peace Corps ran the planes.
No, they weren't random planes. They're all sent by the same white guys in Texas, to fly this stuff across the border. Arthur.
I think the only relevance is that it shows that in a subtle way that it was the American demand for drugs that kept this thing going. And that's true. There's no falsity about that. I thought this movie really was showing the beginnings of the growth of the whole Colombian drug trade and how it destroyed and continues to destroy local peoples. Look at all the murders that are happening as a result. And this was just a small microcosm. of the growth of the drug trade.
Yeah, remember that the mercenaries who were brought in were from Medellin, which was the cocaine capital of South America.
Yeah.
The Medellin cartels were as powerful as the Mexican cartels.
And this whole community was in the very, very northwest or northeast peninsula of the country that it shares with Venezuela.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
essentially
an outpost.
Yeah,
Nobody
wanted it. Nobody could tame it. It straddled the border. So it was a no man's land. They did what they wanted for millennia. You know, in a way, they're the anachronism, the anomaly from the past that you shouldn't exist now because we have like 6-cylinder gasoline powered engines, you know, that aren't going to collapse in the desert at this point. And but they did. They were insulated, and this sudden rush of modernity is what crushed them. So
and it shows how this what was the cousin who wound up growing the marijuana? Annibal had acreage. He was in a fertile part of the land, and he was led to engage for the first time in this marijuana trade.
Yeah, he was lured into it too.
So
for profit, right? So look, when there's no source of profit in front of you, and one presents itself, you seize upon it. It's the the fundamental human need to acquire, to take care of your family, to increase your family, to increase your holdings. When you're not starving, I don't want to blame people for pursuing more profit. I won't do that. But you have to, at some point, you have to look at what is reasonable. My brother was a utilities lawyer representing the largest utility in Chicago. And we had an argument once. And I said, it's terrible that Chicago Edison, controls the ability to heat apartments for all these millions of poor Chicagoans. And he said, well, you have to incentivize the business or no natural gas will be provided to them. And I said, well, that's okay, but do they have to take so much profit? And of course, the conversation ended there because he was about defending their profits and I was about monitoring their profits so that people could afford the gas. Well, that was 30, 40 years ago. And, we continued not to see eye to eye for the next several decades.
Because you're a Bolshevik.
I'm a Bolshevik? I don't think so. I don't think so. But no, it's like coming of age in the 60s. Let's look at ourselves. Didn't you believe in the civil rights movement? You may not have liked Abby Hoffman or Jerry Rubin and thought they were wild and ridiculous, saying never trust anybody over 30. But didn't you believe in the spirit of it? That the Vietnam War perhaps was, ill-conceived and that we were sending Black kids over there to be killed and too few white kids, and that the draft lottery, cut off the college opposition movement because suddenly white college kids weren't, doomed to go, and on and on and on. Sure, LBJ was great, in many ways, and the war on poverty and the Civil Rights Acts, terrific gains. And didn't we all believe, the people here, didn't we all believe that, maybe we're getting somewhere? Maybe we're getting somewhere. And 40 years later, we wake up and we find out, gee, we're still in the same hole we were. It's just different and deeper, and the sides are sturdier, and it's harder to get anything done. Thank you, Mitch McConnell. So I don't mean to get on my soapbox now, but it's like, this is potent stuff. It really is. And regardless of, who the film blames for this, I think it does come down to human nature. And we were kidding ourselves if we thought human nature could be solved by laws in the 60s and 70s. And by the time Reagan came in and cut public funding to education, we were doomed. We were just doomed because people don't question anymore. The schools are underfunded. The teachers are undertrained. This is my rant. We haven't taught people to question authority reasonably, with intelligence. We only react now to what we hear that suits our particular grievance. And that's a problem, because how do we restore, the reasonable conservatives of the 60s? Wouldn't we, like to have Barry Goldwater or Scoop Jackson, all those guys, and John McCain, it's like there were people who stood up for the right reasons for the right programs. And now it's just so partisan, I'm very skeptical for my kids in their future. But so I see this as a parable for our times. And I programmed it, Mitch, because I wanted everybody else to feel the resonance of that, even though there's very little to do with, with us today, with the man stripping down to a G-string and chasing a woman in a red scarf around a sand pit. It's like, what's the connection? But these guys did it. It's just gorgeous filmmaking. And I wish we could have seen it on a big screen together, because I think it would be more persuasive, the power of things.
Can you get that done, sir? Can you get that done?
Oh, no, it's not a release, no.
Hmm.
It's like the film Distinguished Citizen, which we all love so much, it just totally went away as soon as it was released after the Academy Awards, when it didn't win. And that's the problem with films. They have one shot, and if they don't break out immediately, they rarely get resurrected, other than by some obscure festival or some filmmaker champions them, like David Lynch or Marty Scorsese, and to give them a second chance at life. But there's very little second chances, and I wish the academics delved more deeply into films like this. Instead, the academics are into film theory and communication theory, and remember semiotics, which sort of killed academia in the 80s and 90s. There's a lot of wisdom in the past. That's why I go to Torah study. It's not that I believe it all. It's because this is a written document that struggles to deal with human beings and who we are and what we mean to each other and what our obligations are to each other. This is a fundamental and eternal question. And these people sort of denied that spine of their culture and of their identity, and paid for it very dearly, and maybe it's less tragic because it was just, some Indians in the outback of Venezuela or Colombia. But if you see it as a parable and a symbol for where we are, I think it's a powerful film. That's why I brought it to us, Mitch. Anybody else have anything to say? Steve, come on, Steve Zimmerman.
Well, a couple things. Number one, the wider Klan I don't know, historically speaking, how the Wagyu are doing now. In the context of this movie, they made out pretty well. They respected it was a gerontocracy, and later in the movie, they all come together and make a decision. They're going to retaliate for the killing of the messenger of the word. In a way, they're kind of satisfied that the two corrupt clans or families got wiped out, because they were the ones who
they helped wipe them out.
Then they left and they say, okay, good, our problem is solved. We're back to our own culture, sort of.
In a way, it's like racial cleansing, isn't it? Or ethnic cleansing.
Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is I saw a metaphor in the airplanes that would be used to transport the drugs as birds of passage. They were the birds of passage for the drugs out of the country. That ultimately led to their demise, the protagonist in the movie. So I saw that as a metaphor. And they tried to bury it in the ground, and they failed in a sense, right? They tried to bury 3 entire planes, if I understood it right.
The film leaves us with the impression they did.
Huh? Yeah, they tried to,
but they did bury them.
Well, but they couldn't bury the effects of the whole thing. And third, I have a question about, you mentioned Leonidas getting killed at the end. Maybe I misunderstood the plot, but the 2 grandkids that I thought were in the movie were Miguel and Gabriela. And I thought Leonidas, ironically, was the one who survived despite triggering the overall massacres. Because he was a grown man. He wasn't wrapped in that sheet that they carried
Who
out of
was?
the room.
Who was then? She
It
goes
was
to ask her
Miguel. I thought it was one of the
No.
grandsons of Miguel.
No.
The grandson.
And because the last time we saw Leonidas, he's drunk in a
He was
hut.
rolling around on the floor. That
was
He was
Miguel.
alive.
That was
But he was
Miguel.
alive.
Leonidas was in that hut. They hid him in that hut.
I know. That's not the point. Point
Right.
is, he was alive.
Right.
Yes.
And he was
Right.
drunk but alive.
This threw me
Gabrielle
as well.
wanders out and says, "Oh, this is useless. He's just drunk and out of it." And she goes off. And as far as I could tell, they never said Leonidas got killed. And in fact, Annabelle was his name, wanted to kill him but couldn't find him. And my interpretation of the plot was that he was ironically the one who survived this whole disaster. And that it was the two grandchildren, Miguel and Gabrielle, those were the grandchildren of Ursula. And
Well, that confused me too, because I did say, well, Leonidas was rolling around drunk on the floor, especially when Ursula sends out Gabrielle, go find Leonidas, we're leaving.
Yeah,
No.
he never gets killed at the end. I don't
Well,
think.
we don't see it. There's a lot that happens off screen.
Well, that would be a big part of the plot
Okay.
If he was tracked down and killed.
Okay,
But
here's the thing, that yes, they took away the boy, Miguel, but the body that was delivered to her was much longer than Miguel. It was
I
an
don't think
adult
so.
body.
He was small enough for someone just to carry out of the room, and then for
Oh.
Ursula, they put in her arms and so forth. So I don't know about that one.
Okay, well, that's a problem with the film then, not to be clear. If two brilliant guys like you figured out.
I thought that one of the profound scenes as to the future of the tribe was sending the girl off with the goats, and she basically is to wander aimlessly, that there was no future really for this tribe anymore. That's what I read into her.
Mhm.
Yeah, for that
her
group,
story.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know about the wider clan though. You know,
But for
All
her,
the-
yeah, it's an uncertain future. Yeah.
Exactly.
What happened to the money that was in the satchel that she had?
Don't know. She bought the goats with it. It's like, it wasn't much money. Remember, it was all shot up. The mansion was destroyed, so.
I want to ask, we haven't paid much attention to the major matriarch. I felt that she was so powerful, Ursula, for the first 70% of
Yes.
the movie. And she ran the roost. Nobody disagreed with her. They looked to her, and if she shook her head and agreed with things, and then that's the way it went. But as soon as her son disagreed with her about
Her son-in-law.
her son-in-law disagreed with her about what their tribe should do. She was chopped liver. She no longer ruled the roost after all those years. How could it happen so simply like that?
Well, as the drug trade became more and more important and the issues confronting them were all about the drug trade, he stopped listening to her and made decisions about, no, we have to go to this. We have to go to the funeral because he'd be upset if we didn't. She says, let's not go to Annabelle's brother's funeral. And I want to leave right now. And he says, no, we have to stay. It's like the drug trade decisions that drive Rapayet override the matriarch and continue to do so until there's that scene, the ritual spitting scene, the purification scene, where he's stripped down in a shack and she's spitting on him to purge the evil spirits from him. It's like he's bereft. And the scene before that was, he says, I had a dream. And she can't interpret the dream anymore, I believe. It's a little murky there. But his dreams stop being meaningful to them. So he seemingly loses power, but she's powerless to help him out at the end, all the purification. And somebody even says that none of that's going to do any good. It's all downhill from there. But I think you're right to say the matriarch, her importance declines. But again, the matriarchal society was, look, the two women opened the film up. It's Ursula and Zaida talking to each other about you're ending your year in confinement. I don't know if this is after her first period or what, but it's like you're having your debutante ball soon. You spend a year weaving this cloth. You're going to present to the other female elder so you can be accepted as a woman in our society. All this ritualistic stuff has a bearing, had a purpose to it. It defined her, and both of them. So, you know, at the very beginning, the women, they're all powerful. You know, the men can have their horse races and get drunk and shoot their guns off, but that doesn't really matter until suddenly the decisions about the drug trade matter. The dowry is what brings them all down, I think, because the demands are so great on Raphael. 30 goats, 20 cows, and what else? Oh, so many talismans and necklaces.
The necklaces.
Yeah. So again, they're dealing in material goods and spiritual dreams and spiritual values. See, that's what's important to these people. It's a very onerous dowry. So he has to go back to work and sell whiskey and coffee and marijuana to get enough money to walk back into the village unannounced, because he doesn't know the rules, and say, okay, I've got your goats and your cows, give me the girl. And they say, no way, you bring back a word messenger before I'll talk to you. It's funny, and it's also, this is who they are. And he didn't quite know his own culture because he's too young. You know, he wanted his woman.
But I think she gave him almost an impossible task for the dowry, because she sensed, she had a premonition that this was all going to go bad.
He was a lower caste Wayu than she. The Pushinas are higher up. Even Peregrino says that. Pushinas are a higher clan than you and I. You know, and it's like Zaida is marrying beneath her. So I think you're right that Ursula may have placed a very high price, thinking he'll never get that. He's just a bum, you know. But he was special. He was determined. So that sets in action into motion this chain of events that leads him to marijuana and the drug trade and escalates. So, you know, who's to blame? Is it the culture that says, no, you have to bring a dowry, or the power that the matriarch has? You know, where are the fatal flaws here? It's human nature. You know, it's baked into who we are and into the cultures we build. It's fraught with unintended consequences. And I think that's probably a good way of thinking of it. But it's very, watch it again if you want, you know, if you have the patience. It's 2 hours long. And I think you'll see a little more into it each time you see it. But it's really an action movie, because every scene advances the complication of the drug trade. You know, somebody says this, and then somebody takes action, and then you see the consequences of the action in the third scene. That's very much just like a rolling series of cause and effect. Brad?
Well, I just want to come back to the fact that this society is able to negotiate somehow the drug trade with their culture.
Yeah.
Up until the point where the libido, that libidinal instinct,
right,
is what does this in.
Yeah.
And so that is the timeless element of this plot. Somehow that culture, despite its being attacked by the drug trade, by this change in values, by, you know, all that does, it is able to survive. They are able to negotiate all of this, but it is the libido that brings it all down.
Right. Well, it's a demon rum because he got drunk when he did it.
Maybe it was surviving, but it was certainly a cancer within their culture.
Yeah.
That ultimately
And I'm not sure it was the libido as much as it was hubris, if we want to get to the Greek
The
mythology.
hubris of power that Leonidas thought, I can do this. I'm
Yes.
the next in command. I'm the male leader now.
Right.
You know, so it's humanity in a.
But we see this very sexy, bathing suited woman undressing. I mean, that clearly is libido. I'm sorry.
No,
Of that
it
one
is.
guy,
No, but
yeah.
what allows him to succumb to libido? It's like in the Muslim world, they claim any sight of a woman is erotically arousing and will lead some man to uncontrollable action. So we're going to cover up all the women and just give them a slot so that they can see through it. You know, it's like, it's oppressive, you know. And when do we learn? Well, I don't want to go there,
They're
but
afraid of the women.
well, women are powerful.
Yes, we are.
And part of it is their sexual power. I mean, look at that dance that the film opens up with.
This is true.
You know, that's who is stroking whom, who is leading whom, you know, who's in control. It's in flux, the whole dance. It's a gorgeous scene. And in a way, you know, it doesn't save the movie, but
I
it's
think
like,
modesty, excuse me, Jim, I think modesty and a woman in a photograph like 1950s is more exciting than what they're doing today.
okay. So are there any other comments about the film? I think we're almost talked out. I know Arlene, come on, you haven't, Arlene Warchel joined us too. And Steve Greenberg, you haven't said anything. It's okay, he's put him out. Yes,
I will if you want me to.
well, only if you feel you have something to say, we need to hear.
I'm just going to say that I'll be brief. Of all the films you've recommended since I've been watching, this one didn't involve me at all. It reminded me a little bit of in the late 60s and early 70s, there were a lot of imported Scandinavian movies with sex and nudity, and they would always have some professor with glasses adding some scientific value. It was called redeeming social value.
You're right.
I didn't find any in this at all. To me, it was a study in the venality of evil.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. You're thinking of
That's why I kept my mouth shut.
Russ Myers would always end his soft porn movies with a flag waving moment of patriotism, and you know, and you're also referring to I Am Curious Yellow, the Scandinavian, you know, thing. And yeah, it's like what goes around comes around. But I'm sorry you felt that way. I just, you know. And Susie, did you have something to say?
Did anyone wonder besides me where they grew all this marijuana?
Well, it was in the Highlands because it was a much lusher place where Uncle Annabelle lived. So it was a damper environment. And, you know, it's the point is it was available and it's based on a true story. So if you accept that, then there must have been something. But again, even if this is all a fabrication, that there was never a Klan, there was never a drug trade. See it as something that tells us about clans, about fundamentalism, about tribal identity, about self-identity, about the structures that support a civil society. That's what this film's about, for me. But then again, you know, that's just me. I'm not gonna, you know, I will voice my values and my judgment on you, but you don't have to like it. So I'm grateful for your patience. Okay, so let's move on and talk about our schedule. We're running into those troublesome Jewish holidays in the month of September and early October. And we will have only one meeting in September. It will be September 10th. I don't know what it will be yet. By the way, if I haven't mentioned this before, I've been watching the documentary series by Ethan Hawke on Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. And all of us grew up with these actors. And the clips are so amazing. It makes you want to see all the films that are cited for various reasons. They're all, you know, American social realism. They're all Stanislavski method. They're all Arthur Meisner acting method from the New York City Actors School. And I highly recommend it. So I will be watching some of the better Paul Newman movies, including the ones he directed, although they never get as much notice. But HUD, Cool Hand Luke, which is a lot of fun. The Hustler, which when he was a baby. And, I'm not going to overwhelm you with them, but if you want something fun to watch, it's 6 1-hour episodes, and you can binge them in a night or two. Really satisfying. And so I don't know. I don't think one of them will come up. But there are always great movies coming up. There are a couple that aren't available. I don't know if I mentioned this. The Duke was charming, but not enough for us to discuss. And then Official Competition from the same filmmakers as Distinguished Citizen. It's basically an argument about, is what an actor does real or fake? And what do you have to do to create an effective performance? It's an argument between two actors who are being directed for a movie by Jennifer Lopez. The other one. Maybe.
Jennifer Lawrence?
What?
Jennifer Lawrence?
No, Jennifer Lopez. Not and it's very intellectual. It's very European, Spanish kind of movie. I don't think there's enough there for us to discuss. I touted it a lot. It's fun, especially if you're into actors and how they do it. So we'll move on. I am looking at Murina. It's a current release, but only available next month on Kino Lorber, which is a very good site. And what else should you be on the lookout for? Don't be on the lookout. So I'll come up with something new, but it's September 10th and then nothing until I think October 6th. So we only have one screening in September and we'll probably have 2 in October. So thanks for the lively discussion. I hope you found the film meaningful and we could extract some relevance to us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, see you on the 10th, hopefully.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Jim.
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Bye-bye.
Elul, Elul. Right now it's Elul. It's important. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Shalom.
What's he trying to do? You go to the red dot.
I wanted to read the chat.
Oh.
Hi, Lou, man.